Hello and welcome to yet another exciting episode of podcast brought to you by ISCCM. Today we are privileged to have with us Dr. Subhash Todi sir, a stalwart in the field of critical care medicine and a prominent advocate for advancing clinical research in India. Todi sir is serving as a director of Department of Critical Care Medicine and Academics at Manipal Hospitals in Calcutta. His illustrious career spans decades of pioneering work in patient care research and education. Sir has been instrumental in promoting evidence based practices and fostering a culture of clinical research within Indian healthcare landscape. He has a deep understanding of the challenges and the opportunities in this space. In this episode, we'll be discussing the current state of clinical research in India, exploring the hurdles that we need to overcome, and gain Sir's insights on how India can enhance its global footprint in clinical research. Welcome, sir. It's an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Monalisa.
So I'll start with my first question. So, what are the key areas of interest and potential applications for large scale data analysis in critical care medicine in India?
India is not unique for critical care research. I think the same principles which are applied globally can also be applied in India. The principles would remain the same, the formats and the contents might change. So, the principles of any data analysis, big data analysis, collection of data is looking at the structure, looking at the process, and looking at the outcome. So when we look at the structure, what kind of ICUs we have, we have a very heterogeneous ICU characters in India. And it will be very nice to have data on public versus private, larger versus smaller ICUs, and collect data from there and see what's happening, what is the outcome of patients in these kind of healthcare settings. So I think that is the first thing, is to look at the structure. Again, in the structure, we can talk about open versus closed ICU. We can talk about nurse to patient ratio, doctor to patient ratio. Most of the structural things are not under doctor's domain, they are under administrative domain. But at least if we can gather data and give it to the administrators, that will also help our cause. So that's on the structural part. We usually focus on the outcome. What is the mortality? What is the length of stay? What are the infection rate? And so on and so forth. But the most important thing in the intensive care unit is the processes. You see, the structure is not under our control. Even the outcome is not under our control, but the processes are. What are the processes are we following? The hand hygiene process and the many other processes that goes on in the ICUs. I think that needs to be analyzed and the data needs to be collected. And this is not a one shot data. This has to be on a continuous basis. In ISCCM, we had tried once to have a software called Chitra. The Chitra had all the elements of collecting structural data, the process data, and the outcome data. And that is where even the global research is going. Because based on data, one can generate a lot of hypotheses and also do research on that. Over to you, Monalisa.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for putting a light on actually how we have to concentrate on the processes to actually collect this large scale data and which will help us in advancing our research potential in critical care.
Todi sir, I don't think anyone else in India can talk about research more than you. So my second question is about the research from India, Indian data. We are probably in the initial stages or a further forward in with regards to our clinical research, especially in our specialty of intensive care. So why is this Indian data is not seen more often in international meetings and journals? So could you please elaborate on that?
Yeah, there are various reasons. When we did an exercise with ISCCM to produce a compendium of critical care research in India. 2013, we had an annual congress in Calcutta. At that time, we had this 5-year 8 to 13, 2008 to 13, what was the critical care research in India? And then again, we had a volume 2 of what happened in critical care research in India. And what we found that most of the work is in abstract form. Only 5% of those abstract had seen the manuscript stage. And that is where if you go to international congresses and meetings, Indian delegates are there, Indian researchers, the critical care community, they do produce abstract and the posters, but very few of them get into the manuscript stage. I think that is where the roadblock lies. And there are various reasons for that. The first is there is no protected time for the clinicians, because most of us are clinicians, which we do research along with our clinical practice. We don't have a separate protected time to do clinical research, which is given in almost everywhere globally in the developed world. They give few months just they can devote on research so they can produce the manuscripts. So I think that is where the roadblock is. Apart from how to conduct research and RCTs, even without RCTs, there are a lot of very good research, which is, if you look at that compendium, it is available in PDF format, and there lot of work on ARDS, in sepsis, in toxicology, in hemodynamic monitoring, fluid responsiveness is there from India. But there are like 50, 60, 70 patients. And the second is antibiotics. The sort of antibiotics that we use uh, are not used so much globally, and we need to know what is the effects of those antibiotics in our community, in our patients. So that research is also done, but again, there are small ones and they are in abstracts. There are big research coming up from India, as you know, the research on scrub typhus, which was published in NEJM, severe scrub typhus admitted in ICU. Similarly, a few months back, there was on typhoid and paratyphoid epidemiology from India, again in NEJM. So there is a definitely a prospect of doing these kind of research from India, but I think we need to get our abstracts into manuscripts. I think that's the most important things.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful answer. Conversion of abstracts to manuscripts and the perseverance definitely. I think ISCCM is in the right direction to achieve that goal in the coming years.
Thank you.
So my next question is actually regarding critical care curriculum. So what should be the essential components of a critical care curriculum with regard to research, ensuring that our trainees are acquiring fundamental skills that are needed to study, design, data analysis, and critically appraise and ethically research practices. So how can we encourage our students to get into this more, and how can our curriculum incorporate this so that they have these fundamental skills which are required to do this research work, sir?
Yeah, Monalisa, we recently did the DRNB syllabus a few years back for this 4-year course, and we did had a research domain. Within it, the research methodology which needs to be learned by the DRNB students were all there. Even ISCCM in the FCCM syllabus and all, having a research methodology is very important. But I think the most important thing which we need to imbibe into our students and is to have an analytical mind. You see, the question has to come from the patient, and then only we can generate research. So having a good idea of research methodology, and there are in India there are a lot of workshops on research methodology. Many of the annual congresses have research methodology. In fact, there is an online along with Dr. Anirban, we did an online research methodology in the ISCCM, which is still there in the website. So there is no dearth of access to the knowledge of different research methodology. Question is how to use this knowledge at the bedside and how to do research with this knowledge. Again, we have to give ample time to the students. Do they have that much of time apart from their duties to do research? And that is where I think this conflict starts coming. Do they probably are not getting so much of time? They just devote research into whatever is their thesis work, and that is where I think we can also imbibe some kind of having a good thesis rather than just an observational study and just collecting data. If they are given a good thesis work, for example, one of my DRNB, I have given a thesis to look at the vexus and see what is the clinical volume status versus the vexus volume status and see what is happening there. In the second one, we have given, they give a volume challenge. They look at the VTI and see the cardiac output, and also look at this at the same time what happens to the pulse oximeter saturation variation. Does that vary? Because not everybody has access all the time to VTIs and all that. So concordance of pulse oximetry, plethysmographic variation index, and VTI, what is the concordance of that on volume challenge? So those kind of practical research, I think ideas would be very important. And the research methodology has to be robust, and ethical committee, good clinical practice, that needs to be known by all the students, which are there. I think these things are in all the major hospitals, having an ethical committee, GCPs, research methodology workshops are there. But I think the guides and the students need to inculcate some practical topics on which they can work on. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for bringing out very important points. One is actually having an analytical mind among the students is very important. And the second thing is that having predicted time for research so that they don't take away time from their work to actually have a good research methodology workshop is also extremely important. Attending a good workshop, learning how to design a good thesis, and the guide can definitely help in actually designing a good thesis. Practical example, as you said, is very important. Being aware of the ethical committee of your hospital, all these are very important practical points. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, clinical trials and clinical researchers to conduct or do it have got a lot of challenges in our country. So we would like you to highlight about the challenges. What do you think the clinicians face? And second point, what are the suggestions to overcome these challenges?
Yeah. The clinical trials, for if you take up RCTs, for example, to do RCTs nowadays, the funding is required, a huge funding. And that is where we start having problem. We don't get funding from ICMR, which is equivalent to NIH in the US. When you go through the ICMR websites, you find fundings are being given for a lot of chronic diseases. Lot of funding in crores are given for tuberculosis, malaria, and all. And I didn't find any funding for acute care diseases. So I think that is the first thing, is the funding. And in the big private hospitals, corporate hospitals, they won't generate fund for this kind of RCTs. And nowadays, with the compensation clause that we have in India, that for any death in the RCTs, the patients have to be compensated very handsomely. So it's only the industry backed RCTs, that is the only way to go. So I think that is where the first investigator initiated randomized controlled trial is becoming very, very difficult. So people are landing up having an observational studies. Even in that, I think we have a strong point because of our numbers. If we have a, like for example, recently we published 1,000 patient sepsis data, and that was taken up in critical care journal very readily. So our numbers, and we took only 1 year to generate 1,000 patient sepsis and septic shock data by sepsis 3 criteria. And we recently did a Hermes trial on fluid responsiveness few years back. Within a year, we could generate 1,000 patients who were septic and receiving fluid boluses. So our number is our strength. And the bigger the numbers are, even a good observational study with a large number can produce a reasonable results, and that is where I think our strength would be in the coming future. Rather than, even in the world, people are getting away from RCTs a little bit. They say that okay, this they are not leading us to a definite conclusion, so why not generate a big data and do a robust analysis and then come to a conclusion on that. So that was one part, the funding part. The second is the ethical regulation, the ethical committee. Passing, RCTs and all through ethical committee becomes a very big problem. And even observational study, doing an informed consent almost becomes mandatory. And that is where sometimes, with the different languages involved and all, the clinicians find it very daunting. You have to have a clinical research team to do all this. It is not possible for a single physician or one or two people getting together to do a big observational study. So, again, to have a clinical research team, some funding is required. And that is where things don't move so much. In government hospitals, I think they have a better opportunity to do more research into critical care given the sort of supports they have. In private, unfortunately, because of the other logistic problems, doing a very big research on your own becomes very difficult. And that is where the collaborative network of ICUs that might help us to take forward. Each ICU puts in a little bit, and if we have a big network like we have in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and UK, that might lead us to a better research opportunity. And I think that is the future, to do a collaborative ICU network among India. There are steps have been taken towards that, but needs to be a more stronger. Over to you.
Perfectly answered, sir. I think the challenges, yes, but each challenge is an occasion to
Mm.
create, change the history and create more history. I think you clearly pointed about the importance of our strength, which is the numbers, and RCTs are, observational studies are equally as good as doing an RCT. That is the one thing which India can definitely concentrate upon. And hospitals, I think. Like corporate social responsibility, the private hospitals definitely can pitch in by giving some sort of a funding for clinicians who is interested and doing some sort of a research activity should be rewarded in a due way. Thank you so much for the answer, sir.
I just wanted to pitch in this. I always ask that, like in government hospitals, the research is done because the promotion is based on how many papers you have
Yes,
published and all.
yes.
But in private sector, I have not seen that if somebody writes a research, whether he gets more increment that year. That part is not taken into account. And I think if our hospital administrators start doing that look, if you present a paper in an international congress, if you write a good paper, then this will be have a very big point in your appraisal.
Yes, sir.
And I think,
Appraisals has to be scrutinized well in the regard of research also.
and
Well
get
point,
the
sir.
research in the as a top priority, not just in a number. And I think that will definitely help our doctors to do more research.
Thank you, sir.
What do you?
Quite interesting discussion on that, sir. The current hindrances in clinical trials in India. The next topic is again futuristic. So we'll talk about the emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and advanced data analytics. How is it going to shape the future of clinical research in India, sir?
I think this is going to completely change the way we do research. You start with this Bayesian analysis rather than the frequentist analysis, and that is more AI are going to come in. I will give an example of the sepsis study that we did. We took almost about 150 variables in each patient, and there were 1,000 sepsis patients, right? So when I gave the data to my statistician, who is a frequentist statistician, he goes through univariate, multivariate. He says, how can I generate data from so many variables as a multivariable analysis? It is difficult to handle so much of volume of data. So they had to synthesize the data and just take the important ones to do the multivariate analysis. Now we have a artificial intelligence, a computer science faculty just around our just near our hospital. So we approach them that can you do something about with this data. They say, yeah, this is the way we deal. We don't the numbers don't matter to us. In fact, more the better. So now they are looking, they are using the artificial intelligence, the all the different methods they have into the data of sepsis and see what they come out as the predictors of mortality, multivariate in the frequentist, and what comes out of that. So I think this model of artificial intelligence, because when we generate big data, we will require machine learning and artificial intelligence to generate results from those data. The classical statistical analysis may not be sufficient for that. So I think that it is going to be a game changer, definitely, and we need to learn more ourselves, at least the principles of art. Just like we we need to learn on the research methodology, we need to learn on all these p values and confidence intervals and all that. We should also be getting ourselves knowledgeable regarding the terms being supervised learning, unsupervised learning, random forest, those kind of things, and what kind of AI tool will be needed for my study that I will be doing. I think so that is, as you said, that in the curriculum, I think in the future curriculum that needs also to be included, using AI tools to analyze data.
Quite interesting topic, sir. I'm sure we're going to come up with more AI tools to help us with clinical
Mm.
research in India. Thank you so much for taking up that question, sir.
Todi sir, our last question is something which a practical tips for all the institutions. Suppose an hospital, a new hospital, or somebody who is interested in starting a research cell, a research wing, and could you briefly describe is it advantages or what are the tips to start that?
To be very realistic and practical, if you separate private versus public, let's talk about the private sector hospitals, because I can give my own example. So when we started, it will be very difficult for a corporate private hospital to set aside funds for research purpose only, because there is not much of a return of investment into there. So how do the clinicians who are interested in research start a research department? Ours was one of the few hospitals in Eastern India to have a departments of academics and research, when there was a separate department. And what we approached the management, that we would self fund ourselves, in the sense that these academic meetings that we do, these lunchtime meetings, and a lot of these meetings that we organize, many industry comes and gives us lunches and dinners. We say you don't have to give all that. The hospital will provide, and hospital is happy, to provide these things to the delegates, but give us fund for our research. And what the hospital administration has to agree is to leave aside that fund and let the department do research on that fund. So I think that is where, in a private hospital, in order to start a research department, it will be very difficult to get a separate fund. So generate your own fund. And I think in India, we have a very good opportunities of generating reasonable funds from our own efforts, because a lot of industries come to us for a lot of meetings. From there, we can generate our own. And what the second thing that what we did was, the industry initiated research. So we took part into that, and whatever money came out, they gave reasonably handsome amount of money for per patient included into the research. We put it that back into investigated initiated research. So take part into industry initiated research, but you have to convince your administration that the money which comes out from that has to be given to the department where they can have their own research. So having generating your own research fund, generating industry-initiated research, and having a research registrar. We have a research registrar, full timer, who looks into all this. And the department can run many courses, small courses, that will also help them. We have like pharmacovigilance course and other research courses. So those people who come and join, they can collect data for the research in the hospital. So I think collecting data becomes very important. Who has time to collect data? So if you have parallel courses like 9 months course or a year course, and there are 10, 12 candidates coming for those courses, and each one is given some topic. From that, they can collect data from the hospital. They can have their own thesis, but with that data, you can do your research in the department. So I think those are the ways we have been doing research in our hospital.
I think that was a very useful, practical experience message for the crowd listening and whoever wants to set up an hospital by their department. I think to begin with, definitely it's something which is not burdening the hospital. You create your own financial stability, and then once it goes forward, definitely, as rightly pointed out, hospitals do come forward. Thank you very so much, sir. I think that ends our podcast for the day. Thank you for your time, and we'll explain facts and answers.
Thank you, Dr. Jacob. Thank you, Dr. Monalisa. Thanks a lot.